Last night we touched the skies, a blend of mushrooms, I could feel it in my head. Ribs I had seen, we've been laughing all night. Drank till the last glass we could barely see. Red was so brighter to see. The darkness is falling all over my face. Memories fading away like angry birds, reaching for a place where my voice would never reach. Can you hear my crying heart, reaching for the stars above the skies? My voice will never.
Hi, my name is Charles Oj. I'm the CEO of Hyber, a Pan-African innovation enterprise focused on delivering impact in Africa. And I'm really excited to be here, and also really excited about my colleagues that are, joining hands with me to, on this journey. My colleagues in Lagos, Nigeria, in Kenya, in East Africa, in Johannesburg, and also in Cape Town, and even outside the continent in London and Paris and the Netherlands. I would love to, talk to us about our purpose here in Hyber, and we're really very excited about using innovation to scale positive impact that brings real and lasting change for the African ecosystem. And as we look at Africa and seeing so many opportunities, we do see lots of challenges. These challenges are difficult, they are intractable, and our intent is to say, how do we bring prosperity for all? And you may ask, how can we do this? We do this in three ways, which we call our innovation missions, around circular economy, inclusion, and also sustainable lives. Let me just take some time now and just talk about each of them. I mean, with the big theme around climate change, circular economy is something that we really push and drive here at Hyber. And it's really about accelerating Africa's transition towards adopting circular principles and actions which are relocalized, regenerative, and restorative by design. The next mission we look at is inclusion. And here we're really talking about not leaving anybody behind as Africa evolves into the development phase that it should be. And our mission here is to create opportunities that enable inclusive African societies for the benefit of many, especially women and youth. Sustainable life is really around improving the quality of life, whether it be education, whether it be health, whether it be well-being, for all Africans, wherever they may be. In bringing these missions to life, Hyber is offering diverse but integrated services. These services are consolidated into three big buckets. The first one is we show up as a venture builder, where we work with scale-ups and small businesses to really scale their impact on the continent. Our second role or service is as an innovation partner. And here we work with larger organizations like multinationals, governments, academia, investors, or even development agencies to see how we can co-create solutions that can then be scaled up in the marketplace. Our third service is, looking at being a systems enabler, where we solve very complex and sophisticated problems in the market, whether it be unemployment or even poverty. How do we collectively bring our resources and capabilities and design using innovation and, if possible, ventures to really transmit solutions and impact for the continent? So we're really excited about our work at Hyber, and we're looking forward to partnering with you and talking with you as we transmit impact on the continent using innovation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here. Sorry. Good evening, and happy Women's Day. Actually, happy Women's Month. Really excited to be a part of this once again. This is actually my third time participating in this Women's Month activity with HYBR. So thank you again for having me. And I am so excited about this topic because I think the topic I'm going to talk about this evening is really, really important for everyone to keep in mind, especially those of us who identify as women, because this is such a precious resource to us. So let's actually get into the slides. All right, so my topic this evening is that true productivity is not about doing more. My hope is that by going through this presentation, telling you a little bit more about my perspective on time and some of the things I've learned about time will really help you shift, pivot, rethink some of the things that you tend to tell yourself about time. To tell you a little bit more about myself, I run my own coaching and consulting practice. I'm a certified executive coach, recognized facilitator, and speaker. And my favorite thing to do is really support leaders so they go from reactive to proactive. And a big way that I do that is by helping leaders really see and clarify the stories they tell themselves about time, the stories they tell themselves about where they focus, and the stories they tell themselves about the expectations they think they need to meet or exceed. Today, we're going to be covering three basic things. The first thing I'm going to talk a little bit about are the things that actually impact your relationship with time. We're also going to break down how time is actually made in our minds and illustrate how different elements, both internal and external, can have an impact on how we focus and how we perceive our time. The second thing we're going to get into is the cultural and psychological things that have an impact on how we engage with time. I'm going to share the two biggest mistakes that we make with our time. And once again, this tends to come from the societies we live in, how we're conditioned, and how our brains simply relate to time. Last but not least, I'm going to give you some ideas on how you can actually shift your relationship with time. All right. And at this point, I'm really curious when I talk about time management, or productivity, what comes up for you, right? Do you feel like you don't have enough of it? Do you feel like there never seems to be enough time to get things done, right? Does it feel like time is abundant? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read about your thoughts on time and what time means like to you. All right. The reason why I think this concept or this content is so very important is that no one actually teaches us how to make the most of our time, all right? And those of you who are here today probably know that as women, there's so many different things that we tend to have to be involved in, right? We have so many different responsibilities, so many different tasks, both in and outside of the home, right? We have to make sure that we take care of ourselves, and typically we're also taking care of others. So it's really important that we get clear on the stories we tell ourselves around our time, because how we engage with time, right, our relationship with time can have a massive impact on whether or not we feel like we're achieving our goals. It can have a massive impact on whether or not we feel satisfied. So getting really clear on how we feel towards time, right, how we show up in relation to time, right, and how we even talk about time can be very helpful in getting us closer or further away from our goals. So I really love this cartoon because I think it does such a great job of illustrating one of the ways in which we think about our time, right? So many of us, especially during this pandemic, felt like we had to do more with the time that we seemed to have. But the reality is, one of the most productive things that you can do with your time sometimes is just to rest or to recharge, right? We live in a world where productivity is constantly praised, but the reality is we are not robots. So really getting clear on where we're spending on our time and making sure that we have some level of a balance between what we're actually doing and making sure that we're leaving time for rest and recharge can really actually get us closer to our goals. What is time, right? And so this particular slide will give you an idea of time from a little bit more of a philosophical, psychological, and even physics-based idea, right? Time is actually something that's manufactured in our mind. It is the point between our past, right, which is actually stories, so something that's already happened, right? And typically we're interpreting what's previously happened, right? It's the point between our past and then our future. And our future typically is something imagined, right? Those are assumptions, possibilities. It actually hasn't happened yet. The only thing, right, that is actually happening is the present right now. And this is actually a mental construct, right, that's somewhat in between the past and the future. What are the elements of our bodies that are involved in manufacturing this concept of the present, right, in our past and our future? There are actually 8 different storylines that create this sensation called time. And we have both explicit and implicit timing, right? It's so important to understand this because what this will help you see is that each and every single one of us will have a different relationship with time, because each and every single one of us will have different storylines, and our storylines will be impacted by different things. All right. So let's talk about some of the things that can actually impact these storylines that create this sensation called time. All right. There are 3 basic things that I've shared on this slide. There are definitely a lot more elements, but in terms of some of the biggest ones, right, that you might find relevant, right, or you might even know about, all right, the first I'd love to share is external stimulants. And also let me know in the chat, let me know in the comments if any one of these things resonates and whether or not these are things that you use or you've recognized can have an impact on how you feel towards time and how you actually show up when getting your work done in both your personal and your professional life, all right? So the first thing that we have on the list is external stimulants, all right? And depending on the type of stimulant it is, all right, this can actually reduce your ability to accurately perceive how long an activity takes, right? So I'm sure some of you here in the audience have maybe, drank some coffee, right? Or some other sort of stimulant that's meant to keep you up, right? How you engage with that activity that you're doing, how you even feel about yourself can be impacted based on ingesting some of those external stimulants, right? The second thing I have on this list, and the reality is that external stimulants and thinking about your health or wellness ultimately will result in a feeling or emotion, right? But I like to separate it out because we sometimes think about these things from different perspectives, right? So another thing that can impact your concept of time or even distort your concept of time are your emotions, right? I'm sure all of you have been in a situation where you feel really happy and really excited, and it feels like that activity has gone by really fast, right? Or maybe you enjoy spending time with a particular person in your life, and it feels like when you spend time with them, time goes by so quickly, right? So that is, once again, how your emotions or feelings can have an impact on how you perceive time. On the flip side, if you're scared, right, your perception of an activity or something that's happening can feel like it takes forever. The other day, I actually did a very similar masterclass where I talked through this concept, and somebody mentioned or remembered or shared an experience where they're actually drowning, and they felt like that situation was taking forever, right? It felt like a lifetime to them, even though it was only a few minutes, right? Getting some clarity on how you feel and your emotions can also help you think about whether or not it makes sense to focus on a particular activity, right? Some work, right? And also whether or not it's going to be possible for you to actually work through that effectively as well. The last thing that can actually impact your concept of time is your health. So for example, stress can actually reduce your ability to judge time accurately, right? Your health can also impact how you make decisions. Not getting enough sleep, right? You might miss a cue or two in relation to engaging with someone, right? Not getting enough sleep might mean ultimately when you're trying to get work done, right, it will take you 5 times longer, right? If you got enough work, if you got enough sleep, maybe something that would typically take you 1 hour will take you only 30 minutes because you're making sure you're getting enough rest and you don't feel stressed out, okay? By also making sure you're getting enough rest, right, and focusing on your health, you can also make sure that in terms of your decision making, you're including the right types of information. You're a lot more likely to try and get information from different sources as well. All right. So these are, once again, just some of the things that can impact your concept of time, right? That can have impact on that storyline in our brain, right? And also can have an impact on where you're focusing, right? If you spend too much time on your past, that's not incredibly helpful because it's already happened. If you spend too much time in the future, that can be very anxiety producing, right? So where you want to spend as much as your time, if possible, is really in the present so you can have a better future and make the most of what you've learned in your past. I, once again, really love cartoons, as you can probably tell. And I think that this cartoon does a really great job of illustrating what happens when we feel a certain way. All right. So what this cartoon just illustrates is that when you've got enough rest, when you've got enough sleep, when you feel good about what you're doing, it's a lot easier to problem solve and figure things out. However, once you're really anxious, it's so easy for things to go haywire, right? And it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to problem solve and to figure things out. If anything, you might not even want to figure things out or even engage with others. So I'd love to know, how do you actually feel about time, right? Maybe reflect back to even today, something that you were trying to get done earlier on in the day, right? And think about what are some of the things that tend to impact your ability to focus or your ability to be productive, however you define it, right? Do you think it has to do with what you're consuming? Could it have something to do with how you regulate your emotions? Or could it start with actually how you're engaging with your physical self, your health, right? And once again, on this slide, I really love this cartoon, right? Just really, once again, just illustrating how one single stressful event can have a massive impact on your ability to focus and your ability to optimize your time, once again, however you define that. So I'd love to know from you, which of these three do you tend to have a challenge with? And once you've identified which of these three you tend to have a challenge with, let's break this down a little further. As I mentioned earlier on, ultimately, our behaviors and our results are driven by how we feel towards things, right? And so if you feel like you have something that's health related, right, what does that actually mean? Is not getting enough sleep making you stressed out? Is it making you feel insecure? Is it making you feel rejected? Ultimately, being able to get an understanding of how you actually feel means that you'll be a lot more control and have a lot more awareness on what to do next. So if you recognize you haven't gotten enough sleep and you feel anxious, or by not getting enough sleep and engaging with someone you feel rejected, maybe rather than trying to do work, you recognize that maybe you need to take a break. Or maybe you should go take a nap, right? Or maybe you should go eat something. So just taking this time to cultivate your awareness around how you're feeling towards time, how you're feeling towards the tasks that you need to complete, you're going to be a lot more effective and productive in trying to get that done. So let's move on to the second part of this masterclass, where I tell you a little bit more about some of the things that we tend to deal with in relation to time, both as individuals, right? So just how we evolved as human beings, and also culturally what tends to be accepted. Overall, our thoughts around time are typically quite negative and fear-based, all right? So let's talk a little bit about what that can look like. The first thing that we tend to tell ourselves around time is that if we procrastinate, AKA have less time, I'll be more motivated, right? And I think that this is something that we see in so many different cultures, so many different societies. It might even be something that you saw in your own house. As human beings, right, we don't live in vacuums, right? And so we will see what other people are doing, right? We will model our behaviors off of other things we've seen, right? And sometimes we'll internalize stories that actually might not be very helpful for us in the long run, okay? So just subconsciously, right, we tend to desire time scarcity because we've learned, once again, that that's how we get things done, right? And this is especially a problem when we're doing tasks or have responsibilities where we are not internally motivated by doing them. Okay. And so when we're thinking about societies, once again, this could be from how you grew up within your family. This could be where you work, right? So you could be in a workplace where things are just done at the last minute and people sort of use the excuse of, well, when it's done at the last minute, I do a much better job of it. That might be true in some situations, but in other situations, that might be leading to stress, and that might be leading also to poor decision making, right? There's also this element of sometimes we feel like being behind will mean that we'll be motivated to get something done within a shorter time period. I'm sure all of you have stories and evidence you can pull where you did something at the last minute and you're able to pull it off, right? And because you have that story or evidence that you can pull on, right, you'll continue to tell yourself, well, you know, I've done it in the past, so I can just continue to do that. Once again, that might be helpful in certain situations, but moving forward, that might not be the best way. Last but not least, when it comes to this concept of time scarcity, this actually leads to time stress. And time stress means that you're typically making some decision-making decisions that might not be in your best interest. You might leave information out. You might overlook certain things, right? You might forget to incorporate some data or some people's perspectives. So really just recognizing that even though this is a way that we tend to show up as human beings, it doesn't have to be the only way. This doesn't have to be the only way you operate, right? And as we move forward, and after I share the second mistake, I'll talk through some of the things that you can keep in mind and start to implement immediately to help shift your perception of time, because there's always more than enough time. The second thing that we tend to do as human beings is underestimate. We think that things are going to take a lot less time than they actually do, right? We naturally have this optimism bias. And what this typically means is that we think something that should probably take a month can be done in 2 days. This is especially a problem when we are sharing task or delegating to others, right? This might also be a problem when people are engaging with us and feel like certain tasks that we do, right, shouldn't take as long as they should. Maybe because that person feels like they could do it within a short period of time, or they have evidence or a story, right, where someone has done it within a short period of time. As I mentioned earlier on, all of us have different perceptions of time because all of us have these different storylines that are happening and have different experiences. So imposing your own storyline, your own perspective on someone else is not the most effective way to move forward. What does this actually mean in the workplace? What this means in the workplace is that it's very important to have a dialogue and to engage to make sure everyone's on the same page, to make sure that whoever you're delegating to or setting expectations for has the resources, has the time, has the energy, and sometimes even the motivation to be able to get the work done within that time period. This is not always possible with some roles and responsibilities, but as much as possible, keeping this in mind will really allow you to create a better relationship with those you delegate to, and also create a better relationship within your personal life, because this is something that can also come up in your personal life as well. Okay, so I'm just really curious. And once again, just to take a breather and pause, have you been making any one of those mistakes? And where do you see yourself making them, right? Are there situations within your personal or your professional life where you tend to find that you underestimate how long something takes, right? Are there elements or tasks or responsibilities within your professional life where you tend to, want to practice time scarcity, right? And feel like, hey, by, being behind, you're going to be able to work through the night and get it done within a short period of time. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know more. Okay. So what can you do differently, right? So we started off by talking a little bit about how time is actually created and how time really isn't a static thing for everyone. Time is perceived very different for every single individual. I then told you a little bit about how culturally and psychologically time is this interesting construct. And because we have certain biases, we tend to underestimate, right? Or we tend to feel like we need to be behind in order to get ahead. Right? So what can we do differently, right? How can we shift our relationship with time? And as I talk through these different ideas, I really want you to keep in mind that you shouldn't try and do everything at once. It's really important that you pick one or two things and start really small, because at the end of the day, your relationship with time is a routine. It's a habit, right? It's something that you've been doing over time. So in order to change that, to unravel that, to unlearn that, it's really important that you take small steps that you can actually honor and that you add on top of those steps moving forward. This is also going to look different for you depending on where you work, right? The environment that you find yourself in as well. So the first thing I always recommend in terms of trying to reframe productivity and reframe your relationship with time is making sure that you're clear on your personal priorities, right? What is important to you, right? What is actually going to help you, right? Get the rest that you need, get better health, right? Make sure you can manage and actually process your emotions, and also get you to a point where maybe you don't need external stimulants to help you stay up. Right? Especially if that's something that you feel you need in order to be productive or in order to get things done. Getting really clear on these elements are going to allow you, right, to feel good, because ultimately productivity and how you manage time is in relationship to how you feel, right? So what are some of those important lines to draw? right? What are some of the scripts that you can keep in mind if you need to have some of those hard conversations in both your personal and professional life? And I think that this is a really great starting point and actually will help you think about some of the other elements I have to share around reframing productivity. The second thing I have for you, and something that I'd love for you to keep in mind, is really just recognizing once again and acknowledging and honoring that we are not robots. Right. And so if there's a story that you tend to tell yourself that, hey, I can get my rest later, I really recommend that you revisit that story and think about, are there ways in which you can incorporate rest now? Right. So rather than waiting for a year or 2 years to take a break, right? And there's many different types of rest, right? What are some things that you can incorporate now, right? Can you stop work just a little bit earlier, right? Can you take off a Friday once a month? Right? So once again, there's no wrong or right way to take a rest, but really just make sure that you are creating time and space so that you can, recuperate. You can get the rest that you need so you can have better health, right? Feel better about yourself. And once again, ultimately not feel the need to have to use external stimulants to make the most of your time and feel good about yourself. Another thing that you can definitely keep in mind in terms of reframing your productivity is cultivating your awareness around when you work best, right? When do you feel really good working on deep and difficult problems? When do you feel you're most creative? Is it in the morning? Is it in the afternoon? Is it at night? And are there ways to really reserve or preserve and protect those times? Really just recognizing that once again, because all of us have these different storylines, all of us have these different emotions and thoughts and ideas around time, it's really important for you to get clear on yours and then to leverage that knowledge, that data into how you actually set up your schedule. In terms of this cartoon that you see here, and once again, I love these illustrations because I think they do such a good job of, just breaking down some of these topics that I'm sharing with you today, is really just recognizing that work will really expand based on the time that you allocate to it, right? So if you feel like something needs to be done, make sure you're breaking it down to the barest essence and you're actually giving yourself time to do it, right? Don't just simply say to yourself, hey, I have this big project, I'm going to give myself 5 hours to do it, because as human beings, it's actually very difficult for us to work for a full 5 hours. Research shows that we can work pretty well between, I think it's 15 and about 25 minutes, right? And we tend to work in these chunks, and that's actually the best way for us to move forward. So learning a little bit more about how you tend to show up when you work best is really going to allow you to preserve those times where you can focus on the things that are going to really move the needle in your business or your career. The last thing I really recommend is planning better. In terms of how we set expectations for ourselves, we tend to really put ourselves out there, right? So how do you actually define productive? One of the things I always love to do with my clients is ask them to write down everything they want to get done during a day, right? And typically they'll have close to 20 things on that list. If you were to put just 30 or even 1 hour towards each one of those things on the list, that would take over 20 hours. There is only 24 hours in the day, and typically we dedicate about 5 to 8 hours to work. So really just recognizing that a huge part of reframing your productivity and having a better relationship with time is also recognizing that we can't do everything in one day, right? So it's really recognizing and acknowledging that we tend to have unrealistic and unachievable expectations. So making sure that your to-do list makes sense for the time that you can allocate towards it each and every single day will also go a long way in helping you feel better about the time that you decide to work. Okay, so just once again, just checking in, moving forward. How can you reframe productivity, right? How can you reframe the time you decide to work, right? Using these 4 tactics. Which of these tactics do you think would be more helpful for you based on where you are in both your personal and your professional life, right? It may be more than one, but what would you like to start with? Let me know in the chat, all right? Is it 1, by defending your personal priorities with boundaries? Is it number 2, blocking rest and your breaks first? Is it number 3, making sure that you're preserving and reserving high bandwidth times and making sure that you're honoring those times that you've set aside for that deep work? Or is it number 4, that you're going to plan better and make sure that you're setting expectations that are achievable and realistic? Once again, let me know in the chat. I would love to know. All right. So in sum, what are these things that we've learned today, right? The first thing I hope that you take away from this conversation is that no two people have the same experience of time, because time is a product of the mind. And there's so many different things that come together, right, to actually create this storyline that we describe as time. The second thing I really want you to keep in mind is that naturally as human beings, we compare ourselves to others and have learned that time is against us, right? Even though this tends to be the story that we tell ourselves across most cultures around the world, we can unlearn a lot of those stories and perspectives and shift our mindset if we're intentional, starting with those 4 things that I shared earlier on in the slides. All right, so let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions around this. But I did want to share an additional resource if you are interested in learning about some of the steps that you can take immediately to help you work through some of the stress related to time and time management. So you can find that at this website here. And if you want to stay in touch, please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn and let me know if you have any questions as well. I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share my perspective on time. I hope that this was helpful, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your Women's Day month.
Hi, my name is Charles Oj. I'm the CEO of
For the first time in South Africa,
a live performance mid-flight at 30,000 feet. To kick off this groundbreaking innovation is 27-year-old Divine Mahara. This is also the former Zimbabwe's Got Talent winner's first ride on a plane ever.
Life is a journey. We are all traveling. Kure kwanda koi koi. Here I have been traveling. Life is a journey. We are still traveling. Kure kwandi doyendai koi. We are all still traveling. Kanango mayorira natso terera iwe. Voda izira ngome natso pembera. Upenye udukuduku mwanawe. Break a leg my friend. Kanango mayorira natso terera. Kanango mayorira natso terera iwe. Voda izira ngome natso pembera. Upenye udukuduku mwanawe. Break a leg my friend. Kanango mayorira natso terera.